Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Peter MacCuspie. I've worked in agriculture for over a decade. I was the managing director of a company called Highfert, and I currently am a professional company director with a portfolio of finance, technology, and of course agriculture. I've been working with Storyboard Multimedia, and they've worked in agriculture since 2002. I have to admit I like research, but I don't do it. So I just have to put my hand up straight away. And I'm here for a brief philosophical discussion about maintaining integrity and economic viability of research outputs in Australia. And I'd like to show you a quick little video. Big data. It can be complex. It can be ugly. But at Storyboard, our resident geeks talk about big data and they talk about data cubes. And in a Rubik's Cube context, each type of data is different and different colour. Each time you move or rotate and manipulate the cube, you get a different view of the data. And if the data's on the cube, you can see it, you can make decisions, and potentially you can create some economic value. And you see, like my 15-year-old, that the cube finally comes together. Now, the interesting thing about big data and the interesting thing about the Rubik's Cube is that convergence of data creates value. Even though I'm not a researcher, for my sins, I did a mathematical statistics degree, and as you converge data, its value increases greater than the sum of its parts. If data falls from the cube, it loses its value and it loses it very quickly. There are 1,431 possible interactions between two blocks in the Rubik's Cube. If you lose one block, it's only 1.9%, but removing the one block reduces those interactions by 2%. If you go on, if you lose 5 cubes, or 9.3%, the power of analysis is reduced by almost 20%. You lose a whole face, you lose just over 30% of your computing power. Now look, it's not that bad. Well, maybe it is, but not yet, because the good news is that we have a primer for big data. Some of you may well have heard of the NVT program. The NVT program is the National Variety Trials run by GRDC. Once upon a time, we had 5 states, 5 systems, lots of overlap, and at times, limited collaboration and listening. What we did in 2003 is the Storyboard began scoping a system under the auspices of the Australian Crop Accreditation System to centralise and nationalise crop variety evaluation in Australia. That system, as you see here, is NVT Online, and it's maintained by the Australian Crop Accreditation System and run by Storyboard. Now, you can see a little bit of a look at the system there. You can actually go and download that system if you wish. You can go and download it from the App Store, and that information is all in your hands, and you have 24 million data points sitting there for you to work with. Now, I know 24 million data points is really only small data, but what we have seen is that GRDC has delivered a primer for big data in the grain industry. They're appreciating the value of data and facilitating its further appreciation. So, it's still data in, it's still data out and processed in the middle, but more than that, it's about integrity, underpinned by policy, procedure and protocol. The trust and integrity can be around the data custodian model, simplified here, and it's about as good as big data nirvana as you're ever going to get. But back on planet Earth here, we are at some real big data crossroads, and there's some scenarios aiming to converge data and create value. NVT was a controlled collaboration and a managed change. A big system was created to capture data. However, there were collaboration opportunities to contribute data, and lots of people get to play with the end result, and it is in fact, from a research perspective, quite beautiful. However, often, economic reality can be a little more complex. We have to get return on investment and resulting IP. And at times, corporate greed get in the way of pure collaborations. Bureaucracy kicks in. We argue. We take positions. We protect turf. Systems cost money to build. Accessing data can be pricey. Time continues to move on. But this is offset by the example where adding 16% extra data gets a 30% extra improvement. But what's the cost of us doing nothing? And this is where we get to the issue of the United States and where they're up to today. And that is a loss of control. If the research community does nothing, we get to where the United States is today and their Senate hearings recently. They found that while people argue about data structures and software systems and turf, private industry just ploughed ahead. The corporates found innovative ways to generate on-farm data. They then restricted grower access to data from their own farm. They then in turn acquired data from other organisations. Agricultural big data no longer exists for the good of growers in the United States. It's as simple as that. Private industry took away the toys and used them to sell more of their product. Australia still has a chance to avoid this, but how? And I'm going to give you a super brief stakeholder analysis here. Politicians need to invest, and they need to be able to enable Australians to be able to get economic value and support the science. Now, an aside. I've been doing the rounds of government the last week, and it looks like politicians are going to get quite forceful in going top down. They're going to tell researchers how to use the data. Okay? It's not going to be carrot, it's going to be stick. The research organisations need to provide the vision, they need to be the data custodians to promote connectivity. The IT geeks, they need to be connective tissue. And researchers, if you want to produce data of value, you've got to build big data into the design. So, in summary, the window of opportunity to have control of big data in Australia is right now. Right now. That's the time to act. It's now. It's the time to be bold. We may not quite know what to do right now, but we've got to start doing it. If we don't do it, we'll end up where we are in the United States. Thanks very much.
Okay, I hope someone here understands this a lot better than I do.
Yeah, when you say just towards the end there that government here in Australia is going to tell researchers what to do with the data or what they can do with the data, what do you mean exactly by that?
Okay.
What kind of analysis they can do?
Look, I think if we've seen that the Australian government has put out their big data strategy at the end of last year. We've also, in some of the research and work that I said that I'd done with some of the government departments in the last few days, there's a sense that government departments have been going upwards and involving everybody in decisions and so being quite collaborative. What we're starting to see is big IT software projects and development and research projects have a top-down frame where people go to the hill, get a decision and say, this is what's happening. That's what I mean about that change.
Okay. You want to follow on?
Yeah, so it's a matter of somehow controlling or stopping the big IT firms from assuming that position, and is that largely a sort of a political decision that has to be made?
It's a little bit of a political decision, yeah. I reflect upon what John Deere say about their copyright. So John Deere are the tractor manufacturers. They're basically saying that they give the people who buy their tractors a right to use the software and an ongoing right to use the software as a copyright, but that they don't own it. Now, if you want to take that further and say that already John Deere are grabbing all of the information out of their tractor automation systems and they have an agreement under American frameworks, which they've signed already with a number of dealers here, you can see that basically private industry is starting to grab pieces of data and taking them away from the people who actually use them in the first place.
So John Deere's done that in Australia already with their current My John Deere thing.
Yes.
So growers already sign over all their data if they want to use John Deere's tractors now at all.
Yep.
You actually can't use a John Deere tractor without agreeing to sign over all your data.
Yeah, that's correct. The advanced software that they have, they've basically rolled out the same US agreement that they have already in the United States. The difference is that our framework of law is slightly different. And I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of our law, but we do have opportunities to actually be able to aggregate and grab that data now, but if we let it go, we won't.
Is there particularly, you've got brainstorm groups also taking action to try and capture value from multiple farmers' data.
Yes.
Is that really helpful or
There are people in the United States who have set up a grower-based data warehouses, for want of a better word, like a cooperative, and some of those are proving really useful in terms of access and information and data. But remembering the cube for a tick, if you've got all of the John Deere data gone, if you've got all the Climate Corp temperature data through Monsanto gone, then potentially you've already lost 20% of your faces of your cube and 40% of your analytical power before you started.
I think I started to understand this, but is there implications from the TPP on this?
Yes, in the sense that we need to understand that we have a different way of doing things in Australia. NVT doesn't exist in the United States. It's private industry doing their own trials. In Australia, our heritage has been that government sits in the middle, acts as the arbiter, creates the processes and disciplines and controls, and then gives that information back to everybody freely. That's the way we do things in Australia. However, if we allow John Deere or Monsanto or Case or all of these people to go and separate that data, to each take their own face off the cube, we don't have a hope of having NVT or similar to provide to farmers because we won't have the data.
Have you talked to the NFF? People like that?
We've done a few collaborations with government in different areas.
And that's fun, isn't it?
We haven't. It's important to note that we've just been getting all of this information together. We've only landed on this probably in the last 4 to 6 weeks. The Senate hearings in the United States were only in November of last year, and it was then that we actually saw, unfortunately in bright lights, the result of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years in the United States. It was then it became clear.
Dennis earlier asked about the relationship between this and the TPP. Does the passage of the TPP, if it happens, affect this?
The TPP is a whole different subject of its own, but if I understand it properly, there'll be an agreement of some sort between Australia and the United States about a different legal framework under which the TPP operates. And so the answer is it is in the definitions of how that's set up, and I don't know where and how the line is drawn at the minute, but it's absolutely vital for us to understand where that is.
Just adding on, you just talked about Australia, and a lot of big data going to be very useful for developing countries.
Absolutely.
And they're probably in not as strong a position as Australia to make sure that
well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, if you think about where Australia is at with a mature Grain Research Council, CRDCs, that this infrastructure that we have, this history of providing research collaboratively, you know, I think we're in a terrific position to be able to put up the flag and say, you can go here but no further. And it's much harder if you're in a developing country but they've got exactly the same challenges, potentially they're worse.